Peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. Infidelity, multiple affairs, greed, selfishness, physical abuse, and criminal actions that no woman would ever wish her husband to commit. Things that no person could bear. Anyone would wish to die 100 times over rather than be a victim of such acts. Before we start our story, don't forget to like and share the episode so it can reach as many people as possible. Without going into too many details, let's dive deep into our story. Our story today is about a young man named Whale. Whale is a young Egyptian man living in the city of Abu Tig in the governorate of Asyut. He was an outstanding, hardworking, and ambitious student. He graduated from college with high honors and decided to pursue a career related to his degree. He got a job as a psychology teacher at one of the most renowned schools in Asyut. As we mentioned, Whale was a top student and very passionate about his field and his work. While working, he was also studying for a master's degree in psychology. He stood out in teaching the subject and quickly proved his competence and talent among the other psychology teachers at the school. He always loved reading and studying in his field and found it incredibly enjoyable and even somewhat mysterious. He was fascinated by how the human mind works, its variations, and how to influence and control it. His reputation preceded him and caught the attention of those around him. Everyone agreed that, with his style and skill, he had a very bright future ahead of him. Among his colleagues was a fellow teacher named Hanan. She was attractive and carried herself respectfully. Over time, as Whale's name was often heard among both staff and students, Hanan started to admire him, especially because of his intelligence and ambition. Gradually, they grew closer. Their admiration for each other turned into a romantic relationship, and Whale decided to propose to her. Hanan accepted the proposal because he was her colleague, had a good reputation, and was known for being smart, driven, and full of potential. Soon after, they got married in the presence of both families, who were happy and supportive of the union. The two families held deep love, appreciation, and respect for each other. Whale's family loved Hanan and treated her like their own daughter, and Hanan's family warmly welcomed Whale. Hanan decided she would be the kind of wife who stood by her husband, helped him grow and improve, and supported him with his master's thesis. Students often talked about how skilled Whale was at teaching, how he made complex information simple and easy to understand. Because of that, many parents started requesting that he give private lessons to their children after school to strengthen their understanding of his subject. Whale welcomed the idea and saw it as a great opportunity to increase his income. His wife Hanan encouraged him, stood by his side, helped him prepare the lessons, and made sure he had a quiet and comfortable environment to study and work in. But as nothing lasts forever, and with the growing amount of money Whale was making, greed began to grow inside him. He always wanted more, so he decided that instead of wasting time moving from house to house to give each student a private lesson, time he could use to teach more students and earn more money, he would approach one of the educational centers in Asyut and rent a place to gather all his students in one location. That way, instead of him going to them, the students would come to him. Everyone would have a set lesson time, and this would save time, effort, and transportation costs. Professor Whale's life started to follow a set routine. He would return home from school, rest for an hour, then head to the educational center and stay there for the rest of the day. This started to worry his wife Hanan, as he was no longer present in her life or spending any time with her. All his time was consumed by work and private lessons. But whenever Hanan tried to bring it up, Whale would tell her that God had blessed them with 2 children, and expenses were only going to increase. He said he needed to keep working for their sake so that they would never be in need of anything. A few years later, specifically in 2008, Hanan discovered that her husband, Professor Whale, was involved in several relationships with other women, and that not all of his time outside the house was being spent at the educational center. She even had proof of this. But let's not forget, Whale had a master's degree in psychology. Using his knowledge and experience, he managed to flip the situation on Hanan and convince her that it was all her fault. He told her he did what he did because she had been neglecting him, giving all her time to the children, and no longer caring for him like she used to. Hanan believed him for a while, convinced that she was the one at fault, but she eventually started thinking of a solution that would work for everyone, one where Whale could continue his work but under her watchful eye because she was extremely jealous and protective of him. So, Hanan decided that the tutoring center should be moved into their home. However, their current house wasn't big enough to accommodate the number of students. She began looking for a large ground floor apartment that could be split into 2 sections, one as their living space and the other as Professor Whale's tutoring center, so that everything would happen right in front of her. And indeed, Hanan found such a place and shared the idea with Whale. At the time, he had no excuse to reject it, so he agreed, and they followed through with the plan. Things went well for a whole year, the lessons continued, life between them was stable, and everything seemed fine. But after a while, Whale began to complain that the number of students had grown too much, and that it was becoming difficult for him to handle scheduling, organizing groups, and managing the students. So, he decided to hire a secretary to help him manage everything, scheduling, organizing groups, handling payments, and so on. The secretary was attractive and managed all of Professor Whale's work efficiently. She lived with them in the apartment as well, since the tutoring center was inside the same place where Whale and Hanan lived. What Hanan didn't know, however, was that this secretary wasn't a stranger to Whale. In fact, they had been in a relationship around 7 years ago, something Hanan had no idea about. The secretary was very close to Whale, knew everything about him, his issues with Hanan, his income, and even private details about his personal life. Their relationship had developed to the point of being intimate and ongoing, completely behind Hanan's back. Naturally, Hanan, being the jealous type, was wary of the secretary, but she assumed it was all innocent and never suspected that things had gone that far. After more than a year had passed, we reach August 2013. Hanan was sitting at home watching TV with her children when suddenly her phone chimed with a message notification. She picked up her phone to check what had come through and was surprised to find a romantic message from an unknown number not saved in her contacts. Hanan was shocked. She tried calling the number to find out who it was, but the phone was always switched off. The messages kept coming, gradually increasing day by day. Then one day, Whale came home while Hanan was in the kitchen, and at that moment another romantic message from the same unknown number arrived on her phone. Whale picked up the phone, read the message, and was furious. He called out to Hanan, questioning her about the message and who had sent it. She told him she didn't know, and that this number had been bothering her for a while. But Whale didn't believe her. He accused her of being involved with someone else, took the number from her phone, and tried to call it. But it was still switched off. The messages stopped for a while, but then started coming again. This time, they were very direct. The sender claimed to be in an illicit relationship with Hanan. This caused a major fight between Hanan and Whale. Hanan was deeply upset. She gathered her belongings and went to stay at her mother's house. Things stayed that way for about a week. But after a week, Hanan and Whale reconciled and went back to how they were. Whale promised her that he wouldn't doubt her again and that he truly believed she was a good and moral person. A month passed with everything between Whale and Hanan stable and peaceful, no issues at all. Then one day, Whale woke up at 7 a.m. to get ready for work, got dressed, and left for his job. Usually, Hanan would wake up an hour later to head to her own job as well. But on that day, unexpectedly, their daughter Sarah woke up around 8 a.m., which was not her usual wake-up time. She knew that by that time, both her parents would normally have already left for work. But Sarah noticed something strange. Her mother Hanan's house key was still in the door from the inside, which meant her mother hadn't left the house yet. Sarah decided to go check on her mom. She went to her mother's room, knocked on the door, but got no response. She slowly opened the door and found her mother lying on the bed in a strange state. There was a wet cloth in her mouth, and her body had unusual blue discolorations. It didn't look right at all. The room was a mess. Things were scattered and out of place, as if someone had been rummaging through everything. Sarah approached her mother and kept trying to wake her up, but she wasn't moving. Something felt very wrong. Panicked and worried, Sarah took her mother's phone and called her father, Professor Whale, who was supposedly at school at the time. When she told him what had happened and what she saw, he was shocked and horrified. He told Sarah to call her grandmother and ask her to come stay with her until he could get back home from school. The daughter called her grandmother and asked her to come to the house. Then she went to wake up her brother, but he wasn't in his bed. He had slept somewhere else. When he woke up, he told Sarah that he had woken up early and saw their father standing in the middle of the apartment, looking normal. When the father saw that he was awake early, he asked him to go check on his mom to make sure she was okay, and then go back to sleep since it was still very early. At that point, their grandmother had arrived at the house and knocked on the door. As soon as she entered the apartment, her phone rang from an unknown number. She answered the call and heard a strange voice telling her that he was the one who killed her daughter and demanded 50,000 Egyptian pounds, or else he would kill her daughter's children and her son-in-law Whale. Then he hung up. When she tried calling the number back, the phone had been switched off completely. Shortly after that, Whale arrived home and found his mother-in-law and his children there. He asked what had happened, and his mother-in-law told the children to go to their room. Then she explained to Whale what had happened, that someone had called and demanded 50,000 pounds, threatening to kill him and the kids if she didn't pay. Whale decided to call the police and report that his wife had been murdered. At that point, the police arrived with a team of forensic experts. They determined that this was a case of murder and robbery. However, there were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no broken or tampered doors, which was notable since they lived on the ground floor. Also, Hanan's keys were still in the door from the inside, which would have prevented anyone from entering from the outside, suggesting she had opened the door herself. Another clue was that there were visible signs of strangulation on Hanan's neck, and a wet cloth was found in her mouth. Additionally, all the gold in the house had been stolen, along with the money from her purse and the wardrobe, indicating that the perpetrator was well organized and had planned the act carefully. Forensics also found unfamiliar fingerprints in multiple locations around the apartment. After that, Hanan's body was sent to the forensic medical lab, and the police began gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. The robbery seemed very logical and had a convincing motive. Professor Whale was financially well off because of the private lessons he gave to students, and he kept cash at home on a daily basis. When the police questioned Whale, they asked if he suspected anyone in particular or if he had any enemies. He completely denied having any suspicions or being in conflict with anyone, neither he nor his wife Hanan. However, he did mention that in recent times, He had noticed a strange number sending romantic messages to his wife, as if the sender knew her. But whenever Whale tried to call the number, it was always turned off. The police deduced from what Professor Whale said that he was trying to imply he suspected his wife had been involved with another man, and that maybe this person was responsible for what happened. They made a note of this and continued questioning Whale, asking him to describe how his day went. He told them that he woke up at 7 a.m. as usual for work, got dressed, and left the house. He then went to the bakery to buy bread, stopped at a gas station to refuel his car, and then headed to the school, where he stayed until his daughter Sarah called him. The investigation continued, and the police learned that there were frequent disputes between Hanan and Whale, and that these arguments were known and visible to others, with witnesses who could confirm them. At that point, the police requested Hanan's phone to examine it and found that a strange man had been sending her romantic messages repeatedly, but she never replied. The content of the messages suggested that the sender either knew her well or had some kind of relationship with her. The police began organizing their efforts, dividing into teams to pursue multiple possibilities and to try to identify the owner of the unknown fingerprint found in Whale's apartment. When the forensic report arrived, it revealed that Hanan, before she went to sleep, had taken a large dose of sleeping pills, likely not of her own will, since she had work and would normally wake up early. There was also a fracture in the neck bones, indicating pressure applied during an attempt to strangle her. This was determined to be the cause of death. They also found traces of soap on Hanan's hands, which indicated that the person who removed her gold jewelry used soap to help take it off. There were many other pieces of evidence, but they all pointed to the fact that the perpetrator had plenty of time to do everything without any interruption and was not in a rush at all. When the police compiled a list of the stolen items, they found that 1,000 Egyptian pounds had been stolen from Hanan's handbag, along with some gold jewelry, which was itemized in a detailed investigation report. During the interrogation of Hanan's children, the police discovered the most important clue in the entire case. Sarah, the 9-year-old daughter of Hanan, when asked about her mother, mentioned that Hanan was very jealous of Whale's secretary at work. At that point, the police began to suspect that Whale might be involved in what happened to his wife Hanan, even though at the time he reported the crime, he acted shocked and devastated. He was clearly a good actor. The first thing the police did was to look into Hanan's background to verify her reputation, which her husband had been trying to tarnish. They confirmed that Hanan had a good reputation and no history of relationships with other men, not even with the person using the strange number that sent her romantic messages. It turned out that number was only used to create suspicion between her and her husband. That number had never been used for any other communication, which meant that the sender was specifically targeting Hanan. They also discovered that the last message from that number was sent on the same day as the murder. The same applied to the strange number that called Hanan's mother, claiming he killed her daughter and threatened to kill the grandchildren. That number had only been used once. The police's suspicions of Whale grew, so they decided to track his movements on the day of the crime. They confirmed that he left home, went to the bakery, then to the gas station, and then to the school. But within that timeline, some strange events occurred. For example, when Whale got to the bakery, he intentionally picked a fight with people there, complaining that the bread wasn't good. Then at the gas station, he argued with an employee who told him it wasn't his turn and that he should wait. Whale insisted he was late for work and couldn't afford more delay. Later at school, he treated his colleagues to juice, which was very unusual because although he was wealthy, he was known to be stingy. These events made it clear to the police that Whale was deliberately creating a trail of witnesses to confirm his presence in various public places, so that, if questioned later, there would be people who remembered seeing him. But that wasn't all. The police also discovered that Whale was indeed having an affair with his secretary. They conducted a full analysis and traced phone calls made from Whale's phone. On the day of the crime at around 7:15 a.m., Whale called a man named Mohammed Khalaf, who works as a metal worker. This was a suspicious call made to a suspicious person at a suspicious time, so the police began to investigate him as well. They soon discovered that Mohammed Khalaf had a criminal record and had been imprisoned multiple times for previous offenses. At that point, the police decided to confront Whale with all the information they had gathered about him. Whale showed slight signs of nervousness, but tried to maintain his composure, relying on his education and expertise in psychology. He told the officers that he had contacted Mohammed Khalaf, the metal worker, because he was arranging for him to fix his car after work, claiming it was a normal and reasonable action, nothing suspicious. Despite this explanation, the police decided to detain Whale and conduct a more thorough investigation. They then went to arrest Mohammed Khalaf. Upon seeing the officers, Mohammed Khalaf broke down and immediately confessed, saying he had committed the crime but that it was orchestrated entirely by Whale, who had asked him to do it. He was arrested, and when the forensic team matched Mohammed Khalaf's fingerprints with the strange prints found at the crime scene, they confirmed it was an exact match. When the police confronted Whale with Mohammed Khalaf's confession, Whale completely denied having any relationship with him outside of car repairs and claimed he knew nothing about the crime that Mohammed was describing. He insisted he hadn't collaborated with him in any way. But the real shock came when Whale found out that Mohammed Khalaf had recorded all their phone conversations, as well as their meetings and agreements, all in audio, just in case something like this happened and Whale tried to frame him. Mohammed had taken precautions. At that moment, Whale began to collapse emotionally and confessed everything. He admitted that his relationship with his secretary was illicit and they had been involved for years. But suddenly, she wanted to end the relationship. She told him that they needed to stop everything between them, that she refused to continue living in secrecy, and gave him an ultimatum, her or his wife, Hanan. Since Whale was a Christian, he couldn't marry the secretary without divorcing Hanan, and divorce wasn't an option in his religious context. So, the only solution left for him was to get rid of his wife to be able to marry the secretary. He began planning the murder in the 4 months leading up to the crime. The first step in his plan was to buy a new SIM card and start sending romantic messages to his wife Hanan, pretending to be someone else. This was to create a reason for what he would later do, and to make it look like she was having an affair, framing the situation as if, as an honorable Eastern man, he could not tolerate such a betrayal. The second step was traveling to a mountainous area in Asyut, where he sought out a group known as the Outlaws, people who commit crimes for money without fear of the law. He asked them to kill his wife Hanan, but they asked for an extremely high fee. Since Whale was notoriously stingy, he refused to pay and decided to find someone else to commit the murder. He kept searching until he found Mohammed Khalaf. At that time, Mohammed Khalaf was complaining about his poor financial situation and difficult circumstances. So Whale offered him a deal: to kill Hanan, claiming she was the wife of a friend, not his own wife, in exchange for 2,000 Egyptian pounds. However, Mohammed Khalaf began to suspect that Hanan was actually Whale's wife, not someone else's. So he started recording all their phone calls, planning to blackmail Whale later with the recordings and get more money out of him. During this time, Whale began convincing his wife Hanan that she was suffering from insomnia, that she seemed exhausted, mentally unwell, and not sleeping properly. He brought her medication and told her she needed to take it to feel better. explaining that they were just sedatives and sleeping pills. He claimed that a doctor friend of his had prescribed them, and that the doctor's own wife had taken the same medications for similar symptoms. Wales said that a few days before the murder, Mohammed Khalaf told him he suspected that the victim was Wales' own wife, not a friend's. At that point, Wale confessed and admitted that she was indeed his wife, Hanan. He promised Mohammed the 2,000 pounds, plus any gold Hanan was wearing or that was in the apartment, telling him to take whatever he could find. On the day of the crime, Wale woke up at 6 a.m. instead of his usual 7 a.m. He was sitting in the living room, talking to Mohammed on the phone. When Wale's son woke up and saw his father already up, he was surprised because it was so early. Wale then asked his son to go check on his mother, to ensure that he would later serve as a witness that she was fine and alive at that time. Then the boy went back to sleep. When Mohammed arrived at the apartment, he called Wale, who opened the door for him and led him into the bedroom where Hanan was. Wale gave him a wet cloth and told him to strangle her with it. But as Mohammed was choking Hanan, he noticed that her body already had blue marks, and she didn't react at all. He realized that she was already dead and that he hadn't actually killed her, meaning he wouldn't be guilty of murder. So he started looking around the room for things to steal. He found 1,000 pounds in her purse, took it, and then took the gold in the closet and the gold Hanan was wearing on her hands. But he had a hard time removing the jewelry from her fingers, so he asked Wale to bring him some soap. Wale brought the soap, and Mohammed carefully removed the jewelry piece by piece, took everything, and left the apartment. Wale had told him to wait for him at a distant location, where he would come and meet him. Indeed, Wale went down and met Mohammed Khalaf to give him the 2,000 pounds they had agreed on, and he also gave him the phone number he had bought from which he had been sending romantic messages to his wife, pretending to be a stranger. Wale told Mohammed that when he called him, he should contact his mother-in-law's number and tell her that he killed her daughter and would want 50,000 pounds, or else he would kill her grandchildren as well. After that, Wale continued his day, going to the bakery, the gas station, and the school, always trying to establish his presence and leave signs so that people would remember him if they were ever asked about him. Despite the fact that during the investigations, Wale was always trying to prove that he had nothing to do with the matter, all the evidence pointed to him as the mastermind behind everything. In 2016, the verdict was given in the case. Both Mohammed Khalaf and Wale were sentenced to death as they were partners in the crime, each in their own way. Wale did not deserve the title of professor or teacher. He lost his wife for another woman who had nothing to do with it, nor did his children. He decided to harm everyone around him for his own desires and selfish urges. Wale did not deserve to be a role model for future generations, nor did he deserve a wife who loved him or children to raise. As for Mohammed Khalaf, who lost his life for 2,000 pounds, he didn't even consider what the consequences might be or whether that amount was worth the risk. All he cared about was the money and gold, without thinking about what could happen next. The secretary in Wale's life, who was the cause of him losing his wife and children, disappeared from his life after the incident. Wale realized that she had only been getting close to him because she wanted his money. She was aware of his income and had begun to feel greedy toward him. The so-called respected professor, who was well known for his intelligence and knowledge in psychology, failed to thank God for the blessings he had received and chose to use them for evil. He hurt the one woman who loved him, chasing his desires and greed for money, with the devil deceiving him, leading him to believe that this path would bring him rewards. He forgot that, even in psychology, all immoral actions have consequences. Wale destroyed himself and his reputation before he even died. He could have been one of the best teachers in his field if he had been able to control himself and not listen to his own temptations. He could have lived a happy life with his wife and children and built a name and reputation for himself. And that concludes today's episode. If it's your first time watching the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll receive all the latest updates. Stay tuned for the next episode. Goodbye.